this guy. Look at this guy's conservative. He's already got it, isn't he? Well, he straightened it out.
Operation Wild Raider is an emergency deployment readiness exercise conducted by the 101st Airborne Division. The unit participating in this operation is Charlie Company, 1st the 501st, the Geronimos. They were alerted on 3 October and received a mercy mission to evacuate 12 U.S. nationals from a foreign country that were detained in a detainee camp. On 4 October, they were deployed to Dothan Airport by C-130 aircraft, flown by UH-1H helicopters to Tack-Runkle, this location here, for extensive planning and rehearsal of the conduct of this operation. On 5 October, they did their rehearsals, operation orders. This morning, 6 October, they conducted rehearsals at the POW compound located at Fort Rucker, Alabama. In approximately 2 hours, they will assault Florida. The area of operations is at Eglin Air Force Base. At that location, we're depicting a country of Enola, which is detaining these 12 U.S. nationals.
Even if they encounter light to scattered resistance, they have to move rapidly before that PW can. Because at H plus 5 minutes, 5 minutes after the first bird touches down and they'll see red.
The unit used this schematic to plan their movement phase of the operation. Further to my left is an exact replica from aerial photographs of the prison camp itself. And the unit has used this schematic to plan their entry points, with one helicopter crash landing in the compound, the rest of the rescue force approaching the compound from different directions. Basically, that includes the concept of the operation.
It took about 20 minutes to complete the operation, which they thought would take about 1/2 hour. When the 12 prisoners were released and it was all over here, the commanding general of the 101st Airborne Division told his men, a job well done.
Since it began operations, Montgomery's W.A. Gale Planetarium has always tried to be on its toes when major celestial events rolled around. This week, the event was a partial eclipse of the sun. Planetarium officials had a telescope set up in Oak Park so that citizens could get a safe look at the phenomenon. And the planetarium's program director talked with us about eclipses and other events in the heavens.
There's no other planet that has a satellite like ours that will just completely black the sun out as the moon does us. They are not nearly the same size, but because the sun is so far away and the moon is not quite so far away, it makes the moon appear to be just about the same size as the sun. And then when the moon passes between us and the sun, why, it covers it up. And there's nothing else like it in all astronomy that we know about. It's just one of the marvels of astronomy. And the thing about it is that sometimes the moon is closer to us than it is at other times, and when it's closer to us and it's on a direct line between the center of the Earth and the center of the sun, then we have an eclipse, total eclipse that can last for 7.5 minutes. Now this particular eclipse, the total part, it'll be seen in that strip out in the Pacific and in Venezuela, will last only 2.5 minutes. Now, when the moon is at its greatest distance from us and we have an eclipse, then when it passes directly between us and the sun, it doesn't completely cover the sun up, and we have an annular eclipse. And that comes from a word in the Greek meaning ring, because when the eclipse is full, you see a ring of light around the moon.
How often do eclipses occur?
Well, they can occur 5 times a year possibly, sometimes no times. It all depends on whether or not the moon moves across a line that is direct between the center of the Earth and the center of the sun. And the reason that doesn't happen every time there is a new moon, now you know we only have eclipses when there is a new moon. And we have 12 or 13 new moons a year. So you say, well, why don't we have all those eclipses? It's because the orbit of the moon is at a 5 degree and 8 minutes, I believe, angle from the orbit of the Earth. In other words, from the ecliptic to the widest part of the orbit of the moon, there's a distance there of 5 degrees and 8 minutes. And that means that you could stack 10 moons in that place in there. So you can see that it's just once in a while, maybe 5 times a year, maybe 3 times a year, could be none.
Are there some people on this earth that will be seeing a total eclipse?
Oh yes, there's a strip extending southeast between Hawaii and Alaska, running down across the Pacific Ocean and across Venezuela. That strip will be about 60 miles wide. And incidentally, there are several shiploads of people who have gone on a cruise to see this total eclipse. The total eclipse that they will have spent all this money for will last about 2.5 minutes in that narrow 60-mile wide strip.
Why all the fascination with eclipses, both scientific and popular?
Well, there's so much that can be learned about the sun when the brilliance of the sun is blocked out by the moon, and you can see the corona. That's what they'll be studying mostly, is the corona that surrounds the image of the blackout part of the moon. And that'll be studied with cameras and telescopes. It gives the scientists information about the power of the sun and the burning of the gases that cause the sun to shine.
Is there a safe way to view an eclipse?
Now, we out here today will not be looking directly at the sun. We have the telescope focused on the sun, but the telescope will throw the image onto a screen, so we'll be looking at a screen rather than at the sun directly. And it's very dangerous. Now, a lot of people think that they can look at it with a smoke glass or with a film or even with Polaroid dark glasses, but it's dangerous because they will not screen out the ultraviolet rays and the infrared rays that do the damage.
Do we have any other celestial events of any sort coming up in the near future?
Yes, sir. I hate to mention the comet after we made such a to-do about Cohode comet a few years ago. Everybody thought that was going to be the comet of the century, you remember, and it turned out to be a rather disappointment, to say the least. But in September, about the middle of the month, there was a comet found by Mr. Kohler. And this comet is moving in toward the sun, and in November, it will reach its greatest magnitude, that is, its brightness. The magnitude will be 6.4. Well, 6.4 simply to the layman means that this comet will be barely visible to the unaided eye. But with a pair of binoculars, should have no trouble at all to find it. Even though it won't be spectacular, it'll be easy to find and interesting to watch if people are interested in watching comets.
Well,
Now, all you have to do is just look into the west, know where the sun went down, then after it gets dark, scan the sky above where the sun went down. If you got binoculars, you shouldn't have any trouble finding it. And I believe will be on November the 6th that it will be at its brightest. Then it'll begin to get dim, but it will be visible on into December. But each night it will be a little bit further south of west.
Will you be set up for this at the planetarium?
Well, we haven't made positive plans for it, but I heard Mr. Kinsall, the planetarium director, say today that he probably would set the planetarium, or rather his telescope up to see if we can't have some interest in the comet.
For those of you who follow events like this, there won't be another solar eclipse until 1978, and most likely the W.A. Gale Planetarium will be ready for that one. Bill Weaver reporting for Composite. Eclipses have been surrounded by superstition for thousands of years and cherished by scientists during recent times. Montgomery went through a partial eclipse. The sky didn't blacken and the earth didn't shake, but a lot of folks who viewed the phenomena safely gained a little more knowledge of the spectacular universe that surrounds them.
There's so much that can be learned about the sun when the brilliance of the sun is blocked out by the moon, and you can see the corona. That's what they'll be studying mostly, is the corona that surrounds the image of the blackout part of the moon. And that'll be studied with cameras and telescopes. It gives the scientists information about the power of the sun and the burning of the gases that cause the sun to shine.
Those of you who missed today's eclipse will have to wait a while. There won't be another one until 1978. But if you happen to know somebody who showed up at Oak Park today, you ought to be able to get a good briefing before the next one comes around. From Oak Park, Bill Weaver, WSFA TV News.
The U.S. Senate has voted to increase the minimum wage to $2.65 next year, and by 1981 to increase that to $3.40. The House version calls for an increase in the minimum wage to $2.65 an hour next January, then to $2.85 by 1979, and a final raise to $3.05 an hour in 1980. Proposals to permit employers to hire persons over the age of 68 at 75% of the minimum wage, and 4 amendments to exempt or lower the minimum wage for teenagers were voted down by the Senate. James Britton, the executive secretary for the Alabama Chamber of Commerce, says the wage package will hurt youth and the unskilled laborer.
The overall results of this increase, this terrific increase in the minimum wage, is going to be inflationary. And today, with the deficit of payments that we have, with having to buy more overseas than we're selling, this is going to increase the cost of the products that we manufacture, and as a result is going to increase the cost of living, and all the way around is going to further cost another deficit. We're going to express our opinion, and have expressed our opinion, to the inflationary trend that this is setting up, and the way it's going to hurt youth and unskilled labor. This is going to be, these two things we think are most important right now.
The Forecasting Center for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce claims the minimum wage increases will cost Alabama 35,000 jobs through the year 1980. 8,000 of those jobs will be lost to women. Labor costs can expect to increase almost 5%, resulting in a consumer price increase of 3.5%. Small businesses in the 2nd Congressional District alone would be forced to lay off 40% of its workers and to reduce work weeks. The Chamber also claims 75% of small businesses would freeze hiring, and 70% would substitute cheaper equipment. Differences on the minimum wage law before Congress will be worked out in a Senate-House Conference Committee before final congressional action is taken on the proposals. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Anyway. And ready for a partial report? Yes.
This body. I quoted from a case. Reason we have to keep getting more wages just to keep up with the cost of living, and there are 2 things. That's the worldwide interest rates, and particularly in this country, the competition we have from foreign imports, that something's got to be done at a national level now. I don't think it doesn't take an economics major. All it takes is a little common sense. When you start realizing what's happened to the shoe industry, what's happened to some of the textile industry, what's happened to so many more of the radio industry, electronics industry, and what's now just about to happen to the steel industry. It doesn't take an economics major, a computer, or a calculator to tell you that's what's causing inflation and what's causing unemployment. And we straighten that out in Washington. We're going to have to do like every other country in the world does, and that's say put their own country first. And once we do that, then we'll be in a better position where we can help some of these countries if we straighten out the way we look after ourselves. And that's got to be done, and it's got to be done quick. Thank you very much. Barney, thank you.
This Alabama Labor Council, AFL-CIO, we don't want to worry so much about protocol.
Following claims that any type of endorsement was untimely and that the council was jumping the gun, the convention resolved to urge Attorney General Bill Baxley to offer himself as a candidate for governor next year. From the Alabama Labor Council Convention in Montgomery, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Mr. Weeks, the Labor Department report just out indicates that strike activity in Alabama is up.
This is a time of high inflation, and it's necessary, if we even stay even, that we get increases to make up for the cost of living. And as long as cost of living goes up like this, we've got to represent our people by trying to bring them up. Most of the strikes that have taken place in Alabama, though, have been nationwide bargaining. It's bargaining that's brought about here in Alabama because of breakdown nationally. It's still a low figure, even though it's higher than in the past. I wish people realize that 98% of all strikes, 98% of all collective bargaining agreements reached by a collective bargaining process at the bargaining table, peaceful, harmoniously. Only 2% result in strikes. That's not perfect, but it's pretty close to a perfect record. And there's more time lost by on-the-job coffee breaks than there is by strikes, and 4 times as much time lost by on-the-job accidents as there are by all strikes. And this isn't just this last year, this is over a 20-year period, this is true. So we think it's a pretty good picture, despite the fact that breakdown in some national negotiations has resulted in some strikes here in Alabama.
Now, the figures we have are for 1976, and the figures for 1977, of course, are not in yet.
Right.
But do you have any indications as to how those will turn out?
Well, I don't see too much improvement so long as we are in an inflationary period here. If the economy is holding still, it's not necessary for us to go in and try to get as much of a wage increase, and therefore it doesn't result in as many work stoppages. But when you're in a period like this, I think you can always expect that in a few cases, the collective bargaining process will break down and result in a work stoppage.
Do you see the possibility in the near future of this level balancing off and maybe even lowering?
Well, you were asking me, in a sense, whether I see inflation leveling off. I don't know. I've seen no indication yet that it will level off.
Judges today, what kind of solution did you come up with to the food stamp program?
We came up with a solution that they are going to continue in the program. Of course, you know, if they wanted to get out of the program, the federal government, in my judgment, will not let them. In fact, they're waiting to hear the outcome of this meeting. They have agreed, among other things, that the Department of Pensions and Securities can make some adjustments insofar as personnel, if necessary, and other cost adjustments that will try to make them come out even, because the Department of Pension Securities really is responsible for the program, but it's being administered back in the counties. And therefore, the agreement was that until the legislature meets, that they themselves would not be without any county funds. That is, it would not cost them any county funds. The county funds that they get come from the sales tax from the bonus stamps, and if there's an overage, it goes into a fund with the state. If there's an underage, that is under what it costs to run the program, they make it up out of their treasury, and we're going to handle that.
Where will the money come from?
It'll come from the Department of Pensions and Securities, but of course their money is not unlimited, and therefore it can be done until the legislature meets to see if we cannot get them to remedy this particular situation.
Governor Wallace, what do you plan to recommend to the legislature specifically to keep this from happening again?
Well, I would say that legislation that would place the money in a trust fund, because in some instances, in these counties and others, maybe since it's divided into quarter increments, this quarter it costs them less. They have overage. But the last quarter, when insurance and bonding and everything comes due, for instance, it costs them more. Put it all in a fund and do not make any return to the state treasurer until you take the entire expense out of the total fund on the bonus stamps of the sales tax.
Do you foresee any other county?
Judge Johnson appeared to be feeling better than last month when he returned to Montgomery following his surgery in Houston. And although he did look tired, he insisted his problem was minor.
I feel good. The hearings were set approximately 30 days before Dr. DeBakey said I should go, and I may have tried to push it some. And I'm having a few repercussions from having gone approximately 30 days before my doctor told me to go.
Think you'll listen to him this time if he tells you to lay down?
I sure will. I certainly will.
You don't think this will in any way affect the outcome of the hearings?
Oh, I don't think so. Oh, no.
He has some soreness of the abdominal wall due to excessive exercise and too much activity.
What did you suggest that he do?
Bed rest for a period of time, and we'll see how he does.
An indefinite period of time?
No, I'd say probably about a week or so should do it.
And this is directly related to the operation that he had last month?
He had the operation about a month ago, and his convalescence has been fine. He's done very, very well. He's had no real complications, but he became too active much too soon and had a real rough week last week.
What are the chances of something like this happening again, say, in the future?
Oh, never. Once he recovers the muscle tone in his abdomen, why, that will never happen again.
But basically, he is in good condition?
Basically, he's in good health, excellent health. So I think time is the only problem here. Should be back to normal activities. And should be able to go ahead with whatever he has planned after a little delay.
Dr. Kirschenfeld said he would watch Johnson closely this week to ensure that the muscles heal properly. And he added if all goes well, Judge Johnson could be back at work on a limited basis within the next couple of weeks. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News reporting.
Without quoting the name, because we're not at liberty to do that by the company, but we have an excellent prospect. Now, I don't want to get the people's hopes up because that wouldn't be right. But I can say this, we have a nationally known aircraft firm that, based on three things, we have in the proper site, which I think I'm at liberty to say we do in Craig Field, based on talking with them. Secondly, based on them getting a contract approved for maintenance and updating airplanes, and we have information to believe they are the first run in getting the contract. But the most important thing is we've got to prove that people will come to Selma, skilled people, to live and to work out there, and that's why we're running inquiries and paid ads in various news media in the Montgomery, Birmingham, Fort Walton Beach area, because it's highly technical and employ anywhere from 700 to 800 people. And now we've had a lot of con artists come by. We've got some real legitimate prospects. Our biggest problem right now is getting the base back under the federal guidelines, and everything is happening in that. It's very frustrating, very hard, and the president of the council serves on that board, and he's been working constantly on it, but very frustrating in getting the base back when we bought it originally and gave it to them, and they have a reason for it. In some instances where prior to these new laws, people got together, politicians and certain businessmen, and just practically made a windfall off of it. So to insure against that, you have to follow what we call the alphabetical soup. You have to go through HEW, HUD, FAA, Corps of Engineers, and it's a reuse plan, and it has to be approved. And we have some problems in working with the various agencies, so we haven't gotten it back yet.
About how much time do you think it will take before you could accomplish that?
Well, we were told they were going to make a model city out of us. President Carter has what they call the President's Economic Adjustment Team that's supposed to help us break red tape. Well, the agencies are even doing these people bad. We have an under-the-table tape recorder. I mean, at every meeting, we've put the tape recorder on the table, and we've worked right. We've taken their word, and nothing has worked. Nothing has worked. And it's been very frustrating. And I have an airport authority appointed by me and the probate judge and ratified by the council and the county commission. And we haven't been done fair on it. And we don't like to scream and holler because people expect that out of politicians, but we've got a right to start screaming and hollering. And some of that's going to have to be done. I don't know if it'll do any good, but right now we're not being done right. That after serving one more year, that I will have most of my programs out of the way. I will have served 14 years as an active full-time mayor and chairman of the water board, full-time there. And I've also served 4 years prior to that as a council. That's 18 years in city government. I feel like that I will have accomplished about all I could. Then this president of the council, who's a good friend of mine, that he's not a yes man, but he's served ably in office and is a very good man, very experienced, and I won't leave, and that's why I will serve another year, which will be 2 until we get the Craig Field situation straightened out. We get everything solidified and my programs, and I hope to leave the city in as good or better shape than when I found it. But I have nothing but respect for the people, and out of respect for them and the vote they gave me, I will serve 2 years. So I plan to step down rather than resign. That's choice of words. And
in the past to solve these problems so that the future growth can occur. 1/4 of this $400 million, or $100 million, is allocated to small communities under 50,000 in population. It is the intent of our region to get as much of this money as possible for the small communities in Region 4. Because our region has always had a history of high rates of participation in HUD programs by small communities, and we know that the capability exists among these communities to use the money in an effective way. The program, which has just been approved by Congress and today was signed into law by President Carter. The program allocates approximately $400 million.
So I'm going to ask Mayor Joe Smith to come at this time to tell the esteemed guests that we have speaking tonight, and get a message down and look around. Get out in the trenches where all the action really is, because your black and whites don't want to leave Alabama and make it up. Selma was a town with a Confederate battlefield on it.
Well, I'm simply asking for the Honorable Court to not hear the case of W.K. Livingston versus Raymond Britt at this time until after the Court of Appeals has had a chance to rule on Judge Bonner's summary judgment, where he granted summary judgment to investigator Jack Shiles and Tom Ward with the Attorney General's office. The complaint I filed in Honorable Judge Bonner's court is a charge of conspiracy between Raymond Britt, Jack Shiles, and Tom Ward to have me prosecuted for a crime they knew full well I had nothing to do with. I've charged them with conspiracy in the complaint. Judge Bonner issued summary judgment taking the Attorney General investigators out of the case. So I just don't see how one man can commit conspiracy with himself. I've simply asked the court to set aside this ruling, or set aside the trying of this case until after the Fifth Court of Appeals has had time to make a ruling on the appeal of summary judgment.
existing ridership level averts about 100 potential travel-related injuries a year that could arise if everyone had traveled by... Continuing the Floridian would be negligible, affecting only several stations since in the region has been judged good. For example, the Chamber of Commerce in Albany, Georgia, cites 63 buses a day.
There are several detrimental factors that have influenced the Floridian situation, such as equipment, scheduling, advertising, onboard services, reservation services. I believe that these factors need to be considered and improvements made in these areas before any conclusions are drawn that the Floridian cannot meet the economic criteria of the company in accordance with its criteria and procedures for making route and service decisions.
The train presently passes through Union Station northbound at 1:20 a.m. and southbound at 5:05 a.m. This is truly not a convenient time for a traveler to begin or end a long journey. This time period is also not convenient nor attractive to businessmen traveling short distances. In spite of the above facts, we see from Amtrak's passenger statistics that 281 passengers per week, or 14,610 passengers per year, use the Floridian from Montgomery, which is the 7th busiest station along the route. These people must be fairly strong supporters of the rail system to travel at that hour of the night. We feel that this is a strong commitment on the part of these passengers to the railroad system.
I have supported Amtrak in spite of its shortcomings because I have hoped it would extend its passenger service to other areas, such as the proposed line from Jacksonville to New Orleans via Mobile and Pensacola. For these reasons, I must strongly oppose the threat to abandon the Floridian or to divert its present route through Alabama, away from Decatur, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Dothan. Abandonment of the Floridian would leave only 3 cities in Alabama with rail passenger service, and those cities are served only 3 days each week.
By rerouting the Floridian through Georgia, does Amtrak anticipate continuing operational deficits? Now, I understand that through your charts that have been presented here tonight that you claim that the deficits may exist, but they may not be quite as large as at the present time. Of course, we figured when the federal government started subsidizing Amtrak that it wouldn't have to be subsidized after, at any time after a certain date. That's no longer true. How can we know that by rerouting through Georgia that will be true?
4 in your handout under Floridian social criteria level averts about 100 potential travel-related. Assure all of you in this particular case that what we are here
make it into that runoff, and they are Bella Abzug, Mayor Beam, Mario Cuomo, or Congressman Koch. Meanwhile, there's also a Republican primary for mayor Thursday and 2 candidates running in that one. A veteran state senator named Roy Goodman, who's more liberal than most Republicans. Goodman is favored to win the Republican primary. His opponent is a radio talk show host named Barry Farber, who's very conservative. But even if Farber loses Thursday, he'll run again in November as a candidate of the Conservative Party here. If all this is confusing, it's confusing for the candidates, too. For a debate on public television the other night, all 9 had to crowd onto one stage. In the highlight, someone threw a pie at Mayor Beam. Watch. It was an apple pie, and it missed. Watch again in slow motion.
Are beginning to become instant experts.
Oh, come on. The pie thrower, who said he was from the Pie in the Sky party, was taken off.
Let's get away from me, will you? Don't worry about it.
Please, everyone, please sit down. Please sit down. Mr. Beam, I know you want to finish your statement and reassure the audience that everything is well.
Everything is well.
But everything is far from well for the mayor as New York voters get ready to go to the polls Thursday. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
In cities all over the world these days, there's congestion, even underground. The cables beneath the streets carry more and more phone calls, computer data, TV signals. Do we have to keep tearing up streets for bigger and bigger cables? The people of ITT have an answer. Optical fibers, threads of glass thin as human hair. ITT has pioneered a practical way to communicate over these fibers by light, laser light. Eventually, today's underground cables could be replaced by ITT optical fibers, carrying thousands of times more information in the same space. We could end that congestion below the streets without tearing them up to do it.
Somewhere, someplace, sometime, something deep inside you will make you say, indigestion. That'll be the time for Pepto-Bismol.
Indigestion.
Pepto-Bismol.
Indigestion.